it is the listings. You can come back and say, okay, where was that rose that I was looking for? And they have some relatively new ones. They've got all sorts of sizes and types, but you'll notice that there are listings for like Julia Child. Now, I have one of those, but for someone who doesn't know, why roses are named, a lot of them are after living people. Living people must approve the name if you're going to have a rose named after them. So, do you know the story of why? Well, if you know, but anybody that doesn't know what color Julia Child is, what color would you think Julia Child might have chosen for her rose? If you know the answer, it's sort of a okay. What did she cook with all the time?
Wine, butter. Wine.
Yeah, butter.
It's butter yellow.
Yeah.
So look around here and you'll find butter yellow in a couple of roses, but she chose butter yellow. Now, why on earth? I don't know if Neil Diamond's on here. It is very, very, very fragrant. So I don't know why he chose a very, very fragrant rose, but it always wins the fragrance award in roses, as an example. Dick Clark, he was alive when it was chosen. It's a very nice rose too. And then there are others that are older type roses, or that have been hybridized recently, and they have names that were just whatever the hybridizer wanted. My favorite story was there's a Just Joey rose, and apparently the hybridizer was in the yard, and he was taking somebody around and they asked, "What's that rose?" And he says, "Joey." The guy said, "Just Joey? Oh, I like that better." So it became Just Joey. But you can see some of the roses here, and you can see where they are if you want to look later. We'll go around and take a look at a couple of things. And I know where there's one that has a sucker. I know where there's one. I only saw one. But if you want to walk with me, we'll walk by it and see, can you recognize it? And what you do is you look around the base and you look for things that look unusual, not coming from the base of the rose. And by the way, this is an example. We were looking at things that were fungal disease. This is not black spot. It's a different fungal disease, and I've forgotten the name, I'm afraid. Anthracnose, thank you. That is anthracnose. And if you look in here, if I were going to do a little summer pruning, what did I talk about that might be different? Look down at the bottom and you see there are a lot of leaves down there. You look right in the middle, and literally, pardon me, I'm going to do this. But you see, I'm opening the middle just with very simple things like removing some of these diseased leaves, getting more air and light in the middle, and then I'd probably strip the leaves off these ones coming out of the bottom that to get more air and circulation. And that'll reduce fungal disease.
So you don't have to do anything else. Possibly, you don't have to spray.
Possibly. And especially with this dry climate right now, I would expect if I pulled off most of these, it would come back better.
And we don't spray.
Yeah, and you don't need to spray very much in this climate.
It's okay to cut away a cane that's low also.
Yes, but if you want the future of the rose, don't take the new canes. Take the older canes, because if it's growing from the here's the roots. Here's something called the bud union where it's been budded. If it's above the bud union, you want that. If it's from below the bud union, you don't want that because that's a sucker.
But it's less than 8 inches. The leaves are low.
Well, yeah, and you can, like, here's an example. It goes all the way down there, and I could put off 8 inches, and it's still there's other new growth on that one.
So the suckers will never be on the bud.
No, whatever comes from the bud union. Yeah. But now it's hard to see here because the size is built up. Let's find one that you can see the bud union. Well, here you can see part of it. Here you can see part of it, the bud unions right down at the base.
How do you till the garden with the dam blower?
Well, I actually got a translation on one of my presentations in Spanish. I'm serious, because I've worked with my gardener for 20 years, and I still do a lot of the things myself. But the master gardener mantra is don't blow anything that is like covering dirt. You see how the arbor mulch is, how it sort of holds it together, the larger,
Right.
it can. And so if you have a strong blower, that can do it. Okay, now I think we're going to go. Yes, you see suckers. Here is the sucker. Now, very characteristic. Notice, very few thorns. Foliage looks different. Different color. The cane or the stem itself looks a slightly different color. Now look over here. Hey, this looks like my yard too. I don't get down and dig it out properly every time. So it gets cut off. You cut it off, and a couple weeks later you say, "Oh, there's another sucker," and they keep coming.
Is that another one right there too?
Yes, there's two of them,
Yeah.
and it's coming out. Yes, yes, those are both suckers. And
Too early in the season on this one.
say again.
We pulled out too early in the season on this, and we thought we got all the way down, but obviously.
Well, it's impossible as far as I'm concerned, because I have them in my yard too, and it's really hard. Now, if you want to cut, you notice sort of in the late afternoon on a warm day, like this is substance, it looks a little droopy. They're better to cut for a cut flower early in the morning because it retains more moisture. The other thing is, let's see, I can see a critter, I think. No, nope, that's a vegetative center. Now that's something you don't see everywhere. Can I take this off? See the middle? It's called a vegetative center. It's not going to bloom properly. No, it's not a virus. It's just a spontaneous center that's vegetative. It looks like little buds that won't be quite right. Vegetative center. Sometimes they look like little green puffballs or whatever.
Looks like another flower bud.
Yeah, it's a partial flower bud, and sometimes they are flower buds. That is that's the sucker.
What?
That's the sucker.
Oh,
This is the one. Actually, there are two of them on this plant, but there aren't many that I found anyway. And
How many years were this?
it depends. That's probably I'd say 10 plus years. It is a 2003. It was probably planted not too many years after it was hybridized. So it could be, it's 10 plus years. The other thing is, you can tell, let's see, here's a good example. Yeah, this one's already been pruned, but notice, remember I said about directions of pruning? Over here. Now, if I had pruned this here, it's growing away from this leaf set. If I had pruned it here, it would be growing out. So to keep things, I might take out a few of these middle ones more completely, and then prune to the outside, and that'll give you more air and light and less disease. And if you want I want one flower per stem. There's something you can do in the field here that you can't do later on. If I wanted to spray, this is called the terminal bud. It's bigger. You break this off and you'll get this whole inflorescence of bloom. And that's what you do for exhibition of a spray. If I want a single bloom for like a bouquet or a bud vase or something, over here I've got some new growth, and you can see there's one bud that is the terminal bud, but it's got these little guys off to the side. You can just take your finger and knock them off at this point. They're very soft, the growth, and then you'll get one bloom. And that's where you're doing exhibition of roses. If you want one bloom per stem, you do that. If you want a spray, you knock off the other one. So that's something you can do in the garden.
I got this one coming next week.
Say again?
I thought this one's coming next week.
Oh, great! It's new, fairly new. Watch your thorns.
Oh, I just noticed so much.
This is very thorny, obviously. Some roses are almost no thorns. Lady Banks rose has very few thorns. This one is thorny as all get out. That's a technical term. But you see, there's wide variation. There's variation in color, in the leaf. If you don't know a rose and you're trying to identify it, there's lots of things that can help you get clues. Is it fragrant? Does it have lots of thorns? This one has very few. Does it have lots of flowers? And it keeps blooming, like iceberg and pink iceberg and regular iceberg, climby iceberg. And there's even a brilliant iceberg, I think. This is a great rose, Gemini, and it's got a great spiral form on it. But again, if you wanted to make this one bloom, this was deadheaded. You can see what happens when you deadhead it. They just took off that one because it was the terminal bud. After the terminal bud blooms, like here's an example. To deadhead this, so you can keep these a couple more days. Come on over here.
So it was deadheaded after the terminal blood.
After almost certainly before after it bloomed. It was just probably broken off. You can do this with your finger too.
Yeah, I would have definitely done it lower.
Yeah, and if they were just cracking it off, I could do that.
People come in and decide to take roses home.
And this one is about ready for deadheading. So what I do in the garden, if I don't have my, see, it leaves that little stem.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have.
You can break that off, or you can cut it off.
Go very well. I should get it down.
Actually, it'll do fine. And then you cut it later. You would prune it back below. You wouldn't leave these other three.
Can you say something about when you print back later? Can you talk about the difference between the 5 and the 7? Is there any significant difference?
No, you can go to a 7 if it's pointed in the right direction. The main thing is to look for something that's in about the right place.
Okay.
If you only have a 3, you can cut it to a 3.
Okay.
There's a 5 here, 5 here. There aren't many 7s usually. Here's one.
I happen to have a lot. I don't know why.
Well, it's probably not bad.
So I have them a container rose sometimes, more line, more, you know. So.
Yeah, there are differences with the stress that a container provides, and if you have black plastic containers, what happens in the sun if it's exposed? It gets very hot on the roots. Yeah. So terracotta uses more water, but it doesn't have a problem. Oh yeah, that's a rugosa. Where was it? Yeah, this is a typical rugosa leaf. Rosa rugosa is the Nantucket rose, but originated in Asia. And if you go to Finland, the middle of the streets have rugosas. They're very hardy, very resistant to frost or hard freeze, and they come back. So that, you see how it looks sort of leathery and a lot of texture to it? Yeah. There are lots of different types, but if you walk through, you see, okay, that has a different sort of leaf color. This is shinier. And over here, we get the rugosas. Oh yeah, I see them. I have a couple of, I grew my Nantucket roses from seed.
Talk about thorns.
Oh yeah, this has thorns.
Is this it?
This is a rugosa, yeah. And you can see it looks a little different. Near Plymouth Rock, they have a Rosa rugosa alba, but it's not native. And I tried getting the seed, the hips from it, and I got them from Nantucket and from Plymouth Rock. The ones from Nantucket I got to grow. I still have it in my yard 30 years later. Let's see, some other things to show you. I think there was one over here that showed deadheading pretty well. Showed some examples. Now these have been cut at different points, but you can see how things like here it was cut, here it was cut, and now the growth is out, and you're already started the new growth and the new bud. You've got some more bloom on it, but it's been cut and at different points in different places. If I came by and saw this, and somebody might have knocked it off, I might recut it here above this one to go out that way, or here to have it go out that way, because it's got a bit that might die back otherwise. Yeah, and there's several over here. That one's okay. It's going to go out that way. But one thing you can see is they have quite a bit of mulch, but there's some areas with more or less mulch. This is what, a couple inches of mulch at least in this area. There's some other beds that didn't get quite as much as they ran out of mulch or whatever. But it really does help on everything. Not a lot of weeds. And it does help the soil. And it does help in retaining moisture and reducing evaporation.
So what was the mulch that they get from Linkso? It's organic?
It's premium arbor mulch. Arbor as in trees. Mulch. Arbor mulch.
And
Yep.
then you have them add something though?
Well, the compost goes on first.
Yep.
So we add a compost kind of around the drip line or away from the base of the plant, and we buy it by the yard, and the Linkso mixes in the fertilizer for us
Okay.
at the right ratio.
And I did a YouTube on Peninsula Rose Society YouTube, if you look that up. That is, oh, pardon me. I did one for Linkso that was a Zoom that they have now. And you go on to Linkso Community Resources, and in March I think I did one on organic gardening, and I showed pictures of, I think it was on that one, my garden after pruning with a donut around each one of the compost, and then the arbor mulch was done after that. Okay, let's see. Now, if you were trying to remember or describe a rose, you might say, okay, it's fragrant. Now, this one says fragrant wave. It does have some fragrance even in the sun and after the blooms faded. But there are other roses that are quite fragrant. Are there any questions? Sure.
When we talked about hand watering, to make a basin, fill it
Yes.
up with water, and then move out later. Back. Would it help also if I were to get a long spiky stick and stick it down there so that it goes down to the holes?
Well, aeration helps, but not walking around it helps, and putting lots of mulch. Well, walking away from the rose a little bit because it compacts.
Yes, that's.
And you're trying to reduce compaction with something like a stick. There is also something that's a little heavy that I use mainly for prying out roses, and it's called a digger bar, but they have those that are like 18 pounds. They're very heavy, but they really can get down deep. Other questions?
So are these considered already summer pruned in terms of air, or would you do?
Some of them are, but I'd say that one probably hasn't been pruned as heavily. Susan helps instruct the volunteers. She always said, try to prune to the outside, open up the middle. Not as much of the removing the lower leaves. But
I would be tempted to cut off some of those in the middle.
I would too.
Yeah,
I would too.
I really would.
And this one and that one.
Come back here later when you're not.
I have nothing to do. I'm a member of the Arboretum Society.
I would
Talk to Susan.
be tempted to get like in here a little bit.
Yeah, for the volunteers, yeah, that would be appropriate. But that's the thing with volunteers. They're volunteers, and you can't order them to do everything just exactly the way. Notice this one, it doesn't have much foliage on the bottom, but you could take those newer growths and do that. Now, the other thing about something like this that's grown there for a long time with big, big canes, if you do want to nurture the future of the rose, you keep the newer growth, and occasionally in the winter prune, you take out one of the big ones.
Huh.
And you saw it off down at the bottom.
You keep the skinny ones.
You keep the skinnier ones that are in the right spot. And you can do things like with a bonsai, you tell the bonsai how to grow. In the rose, you can make a prop out of a stick, or not stick, a rose cane with a fork in it. Take everything off, cut the back end straight, put this on one side and hook the back end on a thorn, and have a couple of them, and you can move the cane in the wintertime when it's limber. You can't move these things, but you can move the young canes. And you can open it up.
Yeah, we had a
That's broken
volunteer
in the
this
wind.
last year that got really aggressive pruning off some of the older wood and lots of new canes.
That's the thing, you know, that
Really forced lots of new canes.
they got the root system to support it, but if you take off those 3 canes, you've taken off most of the rows.
Right.
So a nice way to do it is 1 a year or something like that.
So if you pick out the oak cane, do you cut all the way to the root?
No, you cut down to the bud union, and you don't want to have it below surface because the bacterial attack. We used to say put white glue on it to keep out some of the pathogens. So, any other questions on any type of? Oh, there are lots of different forms of roses. This is a very nice Queen of Sweden, and it can get very tall, and but it's not a hybrid tea. The hybrid teas typically, most of them have more pointed center.
Those consultants that make home visits for a fee.
Well, the consulting rosarians all make home visits for free.
Well,
They have the Peninsula Rose Society, though.
for a fee, I don't mind paying a fee.
Well, and we, we accept donations to the Rose Society. But we don't do the pruning normally. We advise. And if you go onto the Peninsula Rose Society site and you look for contacting us, you'll see there's one for Peninsula Rose Society. What is it? Consulting Rosarians, Peninsula Rose Society.org, or PeninsulaRoseSociety.org/Consulting Rosarians, something like that. And that'll get a note to all of us. See who can do it. Depends on where we are, too. Yeah, and you can, and often we'll ask for photographs of issues or descriptions of issues, and then if we can't solve it in email and things, we'll yes, we really need to know this or that. But if there's like trying to identify a rose, sometimes we can do it from photos. And when you do that, it's good to take not just a picture of the bloom, perfect bloom, but also what it looks like as a bud, how many thorns it has, does it have fragrance? All these things are good to get you clues as to what it is. I'm going to get out of the sun here pretty soon.
Oh, it's hot.
We can. Good to get in the shade here. Yep. Other questions that we can answer in the rose garden here, or otherwise?
That was wonderful.
Oh, good.
When you you know how you use those 2 little things?
Yeah, the sharpener.
What if you have a knife sharpener?
Well, knife sharpeners are like this, and they sharpen both sides.
We have one that's old-fashioned.
Like a steel or a. There are diamond hones, and some of my sharpeners are diamond honed. Silicon carbide also works. So, and then there's ceramics. All of those can work. If they can work against the steel, they can do it.
They can do it.
Somebody's going to try and take a photograph here, so
Okay. Let's move up.
go back into some other shady area. Any other questions? I want to make sure I give back the microphone. I tried to steal it last time. Okay?